select meeting to order. As a preliminary matter, I'm Dawn Holgate, the chair of the Nantucket Select Board. I will now confirm that all members are present and can hear me. I'll go through the select board members in the order in which I see you. Melissa Murphy.
Here.
Jason Bridges.
Here.
Matt Fahey.
Here.
Christy Ferrantella.
Here.
It's really nice right now because you're all in a row on my screen. And then I will go through town staff members that are present. Tucker Holland.
Present.
Amy Baxter.
Here.
Libby Gibson.
Present.
Brian Turbot.
Present.
Bill Pittman.
Present.
Roberto Santamaria.
Present.
Erica Mooney.
Present.
Andrew Gors.
Present.
Vincent Murphy.
Present.
Rob McNeil.
Present.
And we have some other people with us this evening. We have John Giorgio from Town Council.
Present.
Martha Turk for the census.
Here.
Mary Longacre from Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee.
Good evening.
Let me see. Julia Lindner from Act Now.
Present.
Thomas Holt from Sandy Petals.
Hey.
Hi. Richard Hussey in regards for Habitat.
Here.
And Lauren Houle. I'm not sure what Lauren's here for.
Toscana. I'm sorry. Victor Brandon.
Toscana.
Victor Brandon.
Oh, from Lauren from Victor Brandon. Can you hear me?
Yes, please. Thank you.
And Nina Pickering Cook from Anderson and Krieger. Good evening. Okay, so this open meeting of the Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment under the Zoom webinar where people can sign in as attendees. They can also submit questions by typing into the Q&A, or they can actually call in as well. All of our meeting materials are posted on the town website and anyone can follow along. As we turn to the first items on our agenda, I will introduce the speakers on the agenda and we'll go to people as they raise their hand for comments or questions. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. Please wait for the chair to yield the floor to you. If you wish to engage in conversation with other members, please go through the chair. Each vote will be conducted via roll call. And with that, we will turn to our agenda. We have one new item that needs to be added. It's in regard to a bike path extension that was unanticipated for this evening. So we will be adding that under new business. And otherwise, I think the agenda is as written. We'll try and get through all of this tonight. If we get past 8 o'clock, we might need to extend to something, but I think that we'll be able to get through everything. So I will turn it over to the town manager for announcements.
Thank you. I think the only announcement other than that this meeting is being video and audio recorded is from our census coordinator. Martha?
Thanks, Libby. Hi, everybody. There's a lot happening right now in Census World. You have heard, I'm sure, that the Census Bureau has pushed back the response deadline from October 31st to September 30th. And you may have also heard that there's broad concern that this decision will negatively impact the count. Potential challenges aside, September 30th is now the deadline for taking the census online, by phone, by mail, or when a census taker comes knocking at your door. And so we urge anyone who has not yet self-responded to do so now in order to avoid having to meet with a census taker when they begin to go out in the field next week. We also recently received information about the way that response rates are calculated that leads us to believe that the response from full-time residents may be higher than what the map shows. On Nantucket, it looks like we have about 550 year-round households that have not yet taken the census. So addressing the public now, if yours is one of those, get it done. We're aiming for a complete count because the census data that's collected will determine federal and state funding and representation, and it's more important than ever to be sure that every voice is heard and every person is counted so we get all the resources that we deserve. Seasonal residents are also urged to complete the census for their island residences because the Census Bureau seeks to verify all households on the island. And if you happen to have winter tenants at your address, they should complete the census using that street address, and you should count everybody who is living there as of April 1. So again, if yours is one of the households that hasn't yet completed the census, get it done. Do it now, 2020census.gov, or respond to a knock on your door soon by a census taker. We all count, and every voice helps shape the future for the next 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Next, we will turn to our COVID-19 weekly update. Are there any opening comments from any select board members or public comments? Then I will turn over to our public health director, Roberto.
Good afternoon. No, it's still afternoon. Better than good evening. I'm just going to go ahead and quickly share my screen here, and we'll go from there. All right. Okay, so real quick, just welcome to our weekly update. One of the things we want to put out is that the PCR testing is going very well. As you'll see, as of this morning, there were, or at the end of the day yesterday, sorry, I got the information this morning, there were 4,300 PCR tests at the hospital. And using the self-pay portion or the asymptomatic testing, 1,566 people have done that. That is what a program that they're calling the CastNet program, and it is working very well. As far as the grant goes, 298 of those tests have been paid for by the grant. So as far as the grant money goes, the 298 of those comes out to $44,700. So they're almost done with that first $50,000 that was appropriated. So they will be getting an accounting to Brian as soon as they can so that we can get that request for that second $50,000. They continue to test between 80 and 100 people a day. And it's now with the governor's order, those numbers are expected to go up, so they're starting to gearing up for that. They have requested, if anyone is watching or if we're going to get any information out, they have requested that people try to sign up in advance. We've added a section, well in advance. We've added a section to the sign up. If anyone has a specific request for what day or time that they can come in, they can put it in there so that when they get here for the governor's travel order requiring a negative test within the 72 hours of their traveling, we can do that. We can accommodate that without overwhelming the whole system. So over the past week, we've seen few more rises in the cases due to these, like we've said before, just like always, there are individual pockets of people coming to the island, and they start showing symptoms here, and they'll maybe infect one or two other people within their social circle, but we were able to stop that spread through the contact tracing. But in these last 7 days, all but one of the cases, by the time we got that positive test come back and we got in contact with them, they were gone. A lot of them were already back home. So it turns into a little bit issue. Once we do our contact tracing, we get in and we find out that they've gone home. Once we do our section that they were infectious here, we transfer the rest of the case to their state or their local Board of Health. As far as the metrics go, we're still doing very well, green across the board. So really quick, I'm going to go through the next metrics here. The positive testing rate is still below 10%. Out of the total, I actually added the calculations here so that we can follow along. I've had a few questions about how we get to our numbers. So of the total tests, 41 positives out of the 4,200, which was when I did this calculation, was using the information from early yesterday, which was the end of the day on Monday. So a 41 out of the 4,200, that is a 0.97% positivity rate, but 0% of the testing done on August 3rd. There were no positives on August 3rd. We've had actually no positives for close to a week now. So we're doing very well, and we really appreciate that. We still have the lowest caseload in the state of Massachusetts. So that is very important to understand. I know that every case seems like a punch in the gut, but it is very important for the public to understand that we are still doing, as for lack of a better word, in a pandemic side, we're still doing the best in the state as far as counties go. We have the lowest infectious rate. And then of the last 7 days, only 0.18% of all the tests in the last 7 days have come back positive. So we're doing very well. So number of individuals who have died, we still have just the one person, which is 2.4% of the 41 cases. Still very good. It is still only less than half of 1% of the total cases. Of the total tested. We're still zero of all those in the hospital. We're getting that 1%. The one person is getting discharged right now. He will still need to be in isolation and still being monitored. But good news is the one person that was hospitalized is getting better, and they'll be getting discharged. Still doing well in our readiness and our capacity. As I said in the previous two slides, the hospital is looking to gear up that testing capacity. So we're doing well. Still doing well on contact tracing. So it's, even though the occasional test, we do still get a little, our contact, Elizabeth, you've been amazing. Our main contact tracer, Elizabeth Harris at the hospital, on occasion does get some abuse. You'll see in our demographics or our age range numbers that I will go through in just a second. It still shows up as a few non-applicables. You'll see a few NAs in the pie chart for the ages. That's because we have some people refusing to give us information. And unfortunately, we're not allowed to force people to give us information on contact tracing, things like that, without a court order. And even then, when they do start giving us information, if the person chooses to lie to us, sometimes we just can't, we can't follow up on those lies if they are lying. So it is a little bit difficult, but you'll see that we're actually still doing very well. I wanted to get into real quick, we're getting a lot of questions about demographics and privacy issues, and I've discussed about privacy issues, so I want to do a quick 3 slides here on HIPAA and the privacy issues that we're running into. And it's really important to push out. So you may have heard the word HIPAA thrown out there. Often you'll see it spelled HIPPA, but actually it's spelled HIPAA. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act has been in effect for decades at this point, and it's been organized into 5 sections. They call them Title I, Title II, Title III through Title V. Title II establishes policies regarding privacy and things, privacy of a patient and any of their identifiable information, which you'll hear me refer to PHI, which is protective health information. And almost all medical information is covered through this privacy rule. And I put the reference here for anyone who wants to look that up. So what does the privacy rule actually do? It explicitly tells us what we are allowed and not allowed to disclose. And almost all of it cannot be disclosed without an express written permission from the patient themselves. They have to let us know in writing before we can issue any information. There are very specific circumstances that we're allowed to disclose information. So for example, if we have to do a wellness check, so if a social worker at a school runs into child abuse or neglect, that sort of information can be issued to the police department. If a person comes down with something like COVID, we can tell the first responders. We can put a flag in the dispatch so that they know that there's somebody with COVID at a house in case they have to respond, to make sure they're wearing their mask, their gloves, universal precautions like that. But even when that disclosure is necessary, so for example, all we're able to do is say they have COVID. We cannot say that we cannot tell the police department that they have COVID and cancer and asthma and diabetes, because that's not relevant to the response. So it's only that little piece of information that is relevant that we're allowed to give. And then lastly, with that privacy rule, a person has the right to privacy of their own information, and they can look at all of their own information whenever they request it, but not necessarily of anyone else. So including relatives. So if I wouldn't have information, I wouldn't have the right to information, health information of my own spouse, unless she gave express written permission to allow me to see her health information. The only times that this sort of stuff gets blurred is when you have a healthcare proxy, or if you're taking care of a dependent. If you have access to your child's health information. But even then, once the child hits a specific age, there are pieces of information that are allowed to be kept private from even parents, which is a huge part of you hear a lot of conversations about, Roe versus Wade. That is actually a big part of Roe versus Wade, which is the right to privacy in the patient. A lot of people like to say that Roe versus Wade was about abortion. That just happened to be the catalyst for that lawsuit. It is more of a right to privacy case than anything else. So I don't want to get into a huge, long-winded HIPAA conversation. So I have a link in here if anyone wants to go through to the Health and Human Services website. This is the Federal Health and Human Services, to get more information on HIPAA and some training. There is training modules in there, and there's a whole professional guide and guide for non-professionals as well on that website that we can go through. What is really important is you have to treat this COVID outbreak very similar to if we were to have a norovirus outbreak in the schools. So if there's a norovirus outbreak, what ends up happening is the school gets closed for cleaning, a letter or communication gets sent out to parents saying there is norovirus at the location. Somebody came back positive, but we can't tell you who. That's the type of thing. So, or if there is something like a lice, at a daycare, information gets sent out saying there was lice, so you should have your child checked. That's the same thing. We cannot say Johnny whatever got lice and he's in class with your son or daughter, and therefore you should have your child checked. That's protected by HIPAA, and that is a very serious violation. So that's kind of what we're trying to avoid here. With Nantucket being such a small town, the guidance coming in from the state through our phone calls with the Bureau of Infectious Disease has told us that in towns that are less than 20,000 people, and yes, I know the argument of, well, we have 40,000 people on the island right now. Yes, but our island is still technically year-round, less than 20,000 people. So the guidance is try to give as few and little information as possible. If it is things like less than 5 people is actually the standard. So if it's 5 people, you can say there were 5 people who can do this. There were 5 people within the age of whatever. But what we can do is say in clusters, aggregate numbers, which is what you'll see in the age group slide, or it's not a slide, it's an extra paper. So the biggest argument that we're seeing in other towns as well, we're not the only town dealing with people asking for demographic information. We have a town so small that if we give age, sex, and location of where a person is from, you can narrow that down completely to somebody. If we were to say there was a 19-year-old male from Greenwich, Connecticut, or Darien, Connecticut, or something like that, you can narrow that down very easily to, oh, wow, there were 3 19-year-old males that went through my store that I knew are from Darien, Connecticut. And you can narrow it down to those specific people because we're such a small town. So just wanted to leave it here with the privacy issue, and then I'll take the questions shortly. One of the big things that we've been seeing is there will be some discussions on where we are. There's a Board of Health meeting on Friday, a joint meeting with the Select Board, as you're all aware, for the public as well. We'll be reviewing the order from last week to see how things are going, and there will be also an enforcement review at that point as well. I believe there's also some tonight. Most important part is to maintain vigilance. Same thing, we're not out of the woods yet. So there will be more of this coming, more information as we go along. So real quick, as the last part, you can all see this pie chart. Okay, so with the pie chart, this is just the age breakdown that I wanted to get to. You'll see here that 17% of all our cases refuse to give information. This is information that we can't find in MAVEN. MAVEN is the Massachusetts Virtual Epidemiologic Network, which is, when you find that name, you understand why we call it MAVEN for short. So it's 17% of the people are refusing to give information, but a great majority of all our cases come from the 20 to 39-year-old range. That is a huge chunk of everything here. And then much less within the 40 to 69-year-old, and then 70 plus here. So that's one of the parts that we're trying to pay attention to. When people are here, the group that is more likely to use those apps that I mentioned at the last report, the groups that are more likely to be at the restaurants consuming the amount of alcohol that we were worried about, is from this age group, and this is why. We're trying to target to close to 50% of all our cases are from an age group that we can target in our interventions. Cutting down that, if we were to cut down cases by 50%, we'd be back to our June numbers, which would be fantastic. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen, and I know that there might be questions because better information comes out from the questions than comes from my slides here.
Does anyone have questions? Either board or public or Jason?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to kind of reiterate what I said last week of how good these presentations are. I feel like we got the metrics down and we have the stories and the narrative behind it. And it's really helpful for me to be able to talk to the public and the public just to see this and how we're going through it. So I want to thank you, Roberto, and the hospital and all your team that's putting this together. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason.
That, then Christy.
Yeah, same that Jason said. I agree. Just a quick question. The other day we talked about a false positive. So they have the test, they have the nose swab, and they're positive, and then they have it, a couple days later or a week later, and they're negative, and then they're negative again. is that followed up just with a antibody test, with a serology test?
If there's, I think the serology test would have to be ordered by their primary care physician. We can't order the serology test to check for antibodies. I would hope that, it'd be possible to do that. But like I said, that's information that wouldn't be shared with me due to that the same exact HIPAA privacy. Because once they show up with the two negatives, whether they come back positive or not for antibodies, it's not relevant to our work, so they're not allowed to share that to me.
Right. And the reason I'm saying it is, if they've had one positive, do they stay in the positive column?
Yes, we do have to mark that still as a positive because there is no way to know whether or not that person was still asymptomatic at the time of the test. There is always a possibility of false positives, but this is one of those situations where you want to err on the side of caution. So if many of us will remember in the early 90s and the 80s, where the HIV epidemic was happening, pandemic actually as well was happening. That positive information was just so gut-wrenching and so important to respond to that they had to run off that positive, even if they think it is negative, and they had to maintain all the quarantines and everything in place, assuming it was positive until those multiple negatives come back. So unfortunately, yes, we do count them as positives. And once positive, we keep them as positive.
Thank you. Christy?
Thank you. I know I've asked previously about testing of the Island Home and Sherburne Commons. I haven't seen any updated data since May 18th, so I didn't know if that is just being included in the general test numbers now.
It is included in the general test, but we are the governor did order testing. I'll have to reach out and get the information teased out. I know we have it. I just haven't put it into the presentation.
Okay. And with the sewer prediction, was that 0%? Was that for Sconset and Surfside?
So at last week's test the Surfside treatment plant testing was flawed, so we couldn't report that. So the Sconset came back negative, so it was still 0. This week's, I haven't seen the report for this week, but as soon as we get it, we'll get it out.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Anybody? Melissa?
Thanks so much, Dawn. And thank you, Roberto. I just want to echo the compliments of you and your staff and the hospital to translate this information. I'm really collectively proud of our community that our rate remains so low. And I think that everyone deserves a lot of credit for being so vigilant. I understand everything that you're saying about the HIPAA rules and regulations. And I just want to add that I think some important information that some of us might like to know when we do get a positive, and I was grateful to see that graph, general age range. Personally, I'm a little bit less interested in where the person is from, whether they're a resident or visiting, but how it was transmitted. And I think that information that you tell us, like it arrived on island or it was community transmission, is just helpful to put in context the number. And I think you're right, every positive is a gut punch, even though we know how low it is in context. So I just want to offer that to you, that to me, that feels like very helpful information. But thank you for the presentation. I think it's really clear that we are not only in decent shape right now, but vigilance, hand washing, social distancing, all of those things are really important for us to each take personal responsibility for.
Absolutely. Personal responsibility is our biggest part.
Yeah.
Matt?
Well, just another question. What is the information you've been getting from the state on the, sort of the 14-day quarantine? Have you got the forms from them? What are they sending you?
I actually haven't seen anything yet. That's, to use a very famous quote right now, it is what it is. Sorry.
Christy?
I was just going to comment with the Chamber got a regional tourism council update that people are submitting to the state. And so the state is going through all those forms that I think they've received. Actually, I don't want to quote it, but they've received several thousands of the forms. So people are submitting.
That's great to hear. It'd be nice if they told us.
Anybody else? Should we move on to the report from Amy Baxter, our licensing administrator?
Okay, thank you. Let me look at the agenda. What's first? The India Street. I believe I have a presentation or a map. Erica, I think if you have, can put that up. The India and Federal Street presentation for me. Thank you. So we've had, as we've mentioned, we've been working with folks as this is going along. So we've gotten a couple more requests as some folks started to see how this worked and what would work for them. So this application originated from proprietors and a boarding house in the Pearl. I have in here Company of the Cauldron who did not request it, but I just included them because they're on this block. So basically the application received to allow for some more expansion of dining into public ways, into the public street, not a full closure, just some spaces on these streets. We have proprietors at 9 India Street. Again, Company of the Cauldron is also on India Street, but they have not specifically requested space. And then boarding house in the Pearl, which is one license, two buildings there. So we're going to start with the partial street closure that's been requested on India Street. And we were just speaking about this with proprietors and looking for really the space. You see there where the cobblestones begins, Robert's House. They currently actually have worked with Robert's House to use some of their side area there and their porch to add about 8 tables for them. Most of their folks do not want to be inside. They do have a back area that has a lot of windows, but for the most part are using those tables thanks to the Roberts House. Would like to build some decking out onto the street in India Street there and to just pass their building there as well to add additional tables. Of course, if approved and this works out, we would put concrete barriers there and then they would have some tables along that frontage there and are working on written agreements with folks on that street to understand. We like that in writing now, what this would incur. So the plan would be to direct traffic down where parking is now and to shift the lower end of the street, which is some parking and a loading zone to the left side alongside like boarding house in that area here, so that we wouldn't lose it. It would just be shifted and the parking signs would be removed and moved over to the other side. So there would be some parking down on the lower end and a loading zone and then 15-minute spots because that has been benefiting some of these restaurants as well for pickup in the evening. So that would require those things. We would be required to put down the cement blocks and then they would do the decking in that area. We'll move to the next slide. In addition to this request, another part of this would be to benefit the Pearl and the boarding house. Currently, it's just operating as the Pearl at 50%. They are using some sidewalk there already and their little patio there on the side, but would like to take out those 3 spots. It wouldn't affect the handicap spot up front, that would remain, but it would take out these 3 spots just directly in front of their building. And we would put cement blocks down for them to do so. So it would take out those spots. So those are the 2 main dining requests. Any questions right now on those? Anybody? I'm good.
I can't see everyone, so you might need to speak, Matt.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, you said, so you're asking for the neighbors in writing? So they're going to go to the other businesses and make sure that everyone's in agreement?
Yeah, I think she has most of them at this point. I've been working with Orla, obviously, and she's doing that. And again, we're working through it and trying to make it as, least impactful as possible. But yes, we are requiring to make sure everything is in writing for this, and hopefully just in front of their spot, and still have some spots towards the end too, as well. Yes, so we wouldn't execute it unless we do have that full written agreements. Yep. Any questions?
Jason?
I think the idea, it follows the policy that we've already been doing on other streets. It's not a lot different. And for us, we need to stay out of the details, of Amy and everybody can work that out and make sure it's safe. So for me, policy-wise, I think it's a great, I've gotten great feedback from visitors, from locals on what we've already. So I think it's great. And I think there'll be some disgruntled people on the parking, but I have found parking downtown myself for most of this summer at night, and it hasn't been as tough. So I think this is the year to do it. So again, for the creativity and working with the business owners, Amy.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, and we are going to continue to work with folks in that neighborhood and that sort of thing to make sure it works before we do pull that. But yeah, the parking hasn't so far been a problem. The valets have not been full in any way. We have both of those on both sides of town as well to assist. So far, that hasn't been really an issue.
Do you want to vote from us?
I do. I'm going to, if I can, in addition to this, two other things that I wanted to at least have in the vote. One other, which I was able to include in this presentation, was a request from the Athenaeum during open hours to have 15-minute spot directly there in front of for pickup and drop off. And wanted to just make that public request that we would just switch out the signs for during their hours of operation. Just in front of there, they're doing a lot of pickup and drop off as well too. And we did take out the whole road behind them as well, and they've been great with that. So we thought this would be a benefit for them. And again, it would be in the hours that they are open to assist with that. One other thing, it's come up in the past few days. I was not able to include it in this presentation, but it's a similar type of request alongside the Juice Bar area on the Southeast Extension, also allowing some space there to take out, I'm estimating, as I'm looking at it on Google right now, 3 spots with barriers there to allow for more expansion. We're having some issues with the line going into streets and things of that sort, and that's just concerning on a public safety matter and a group matter. So we would like to add that as well. So when I place this order to do all of this, we would want to include those spaces as well in the process of talking to those neighbors too as well for taking out those spots.
Melissa?
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. I agree with Jason that these changes are all consistent with the policy support that the select board is initiated, particularly due to COVID. And I think the juice bar solution on that street is also a really good one, because I think a lot of the pedestrian traffic issues that they're contending with are being really, their hand is being forced by COVID, because a lot of the sidewalks being given up by some of their neighbor businesses. Rose and Crown obviously having sidewalk space for outside dining. So I think, as creative and supportive as we can be, continue to be, is really appreciated, certainly by me, and I would support these recommendations.
Would you like to make a motion? Oh, Krista?
Sorry, just one more question. With any of these road closures, are we able to use any of the shared street grants to make sure that everything's safe for the pedestrians or sidewalk expansion?
Amy, you're muted.
Unmute. Sorry, in my back. We are working through that and how we are spending those funds and for barriers and things of that sort. So we're trying to do that in Congress for that. It might not come directly yet, but we're working on that. And we'll definitely work on solutions that we'll be able to use well into this year and in the future.
if you'd like a motion, Don, I'm not entirely sure how you'd like it read, but I would make a motion to approve Amy's recommendations.
I think that's appropriate. Unless we,
I'll second that.
okay, all those in favor by roll call.
Aye.
Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Matt Fay,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. That passes unanimously. Thank you for all your work on that, Amy.
Thank you.
Is there any update? I don't think there's any update on the emergency orders. We do have a joint meeting with the board Friday. And public information.
I just had a quick question.
Sure.
I've received a couple of questions about requiring the food with the liquor, and is that across the state that's required?
Hi. So yes, I had a lot of questions too as well to define that. So it's two things. It technically is when we went into phase 2, the requirement was that only those locations with a food service permit and common vicular were allowed to open. And that's why places such as Chicken Box made that adjustment, and Cisco, we had to work with them on the food unit. So it's a matter of interpretation, but what it is really is these folks are all common viculars, and even on a normal day are required to have at least a minimum selection of food, whether it be light bites, night bites, things of that sort. So Boston specifically did vote to allow folks to sit down just for alcohol. I mean, the main goal has been food service only, and we have allowed for that. And we would just, I think the compromise here is, as their license requires that a minimum amount of food being light bites, a couple of appetizers, something is available for people to eat, and it should be mainly for food service. And it's going to be difficult to sit there and go to every table on an inspection and make sure people have food. So it has been a matter of interpretation, but they are required to have food service available, even on a limited basis at all times. I think would be the best way to answer that.
Thank you.
Matt?
And the other point on that is they're not allowed to be standing and drinking, correct? That's a state law. You can't be a bar. You can't have people standing and drinking. You can't take your liquor that you now can buy it there and walk down the wharf. I mean, this is... Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, correct. And that's another tough one, but correct. They cannot be standing and eating and anything of that sort. So that's why the interpretation is no bar service at all. So that's why it should be food service, but correct. No standing around doing that either.
Any other questions? Okay, was there anything from PIO?
Not too much. We have been getting a few questions here and there about the travel order, and I don't think anything overly worth mentioning. Town services update. We still don't have a date when town offices will fully reopen to the public, but we are serving people remotely, and some departments are starting to do more appointment-only meetings and interactions and things like that. So people seem to be getting served, and we're continually monitoring again what the governor says and what other towns are planning. So it seems to be working okay for now.
Thank you. I think that wraps up our COVID-19 update for this week. Are there any public comments not related to COVID-19? That's the next item on our agenda. Anything that's not otherwise on our agenda for discussion that you would like to bring to our attention? I'm seeing no hands. And then we do have a new business item. Is Andrew Vorse going to present that?
Yes, I think Andrew is going to present it. It is a bit of a last minute thing. An opportunity seems to have presented itself to do a little project that would be very beneficial for safety purposes. It just has come up quite suddenly and didn't have the normal approval process. So I think Andrew can explain it with any backup from Rob, but I think it really does need select board approval.
Great, thank you, Libby. So thank you, board members, for for letting me come forward to talk about this. So we are looking at a small extension of the bike path from the current bus stop that was just created at Monomoy Road down to the crossing at the Rotary. So this is on the north side of Milestone Road. It's outside of the state layout. It's inside of the county layout. And there's a real opportunity here, since the contractors are still mobilized at the location. And it's a rare opportunity with no poles or wetlands or moths or other things that are in the way to fill in a gap of the bike path that would really reduce the number of crossings across Milestone Roads and crossings and recrossings back and forth. It's several hundred feet, and we would be able to do this quickly. It needs to get done really before September if it's going to get done. And for funding, at least of this section, we have some planning board gift accounts that have come out of subdivisions where small amounts have been set aside for future bike path projects, and also our district local technical assistance funding, which comes from the state for the NP and EDC to be used. So I would hope that the board would be supportive of this. It's consistent with your goals to build pathways from the out of town locations into town. And again, it removes really this a situation where you're crossing at Monomoy Road where there really isn't a good spot to cross, and then crossing back again at the Rotary. And there's two other sections that hopefully will follow in the future, and that's the section between Monomoy Road and Pulpus, and between Pulpus Road and the existing crossing just beyond the Island Lumber site. That project was identified in 1990 as part of bike path extension. It didn't happen at the time because there wasn't funding. And reconstructions, including both of these sections, were included in mega projects like rebuilding the Rotary, rebuilding the intersection at Pulpus Road. Both of those, are much broader in scope than this. This is really acting while we have an opportunity to get this little bit of, I think, really highly effective bike path infrastructure in place.
I see a question from Burton Balkind.
Hi, Dawn, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is, I meant to raise my hand for the part of the agenda that was reserved for things that weren't going to be discussed.
Can I come back to you for public comment? I just want to get through this agenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes.
I'll certainly come back to you after that.
Thank you.
Thanks. Does the board have any questions, comments, Jason?
Of course, I'm going to love this, right? Because it's safety, right? I mean, we've had some terrible problems at that intersection, as we all know, and getting people who are coming out of Monomoy to stay on that side and not have to cross, it's a no-brainer to me. And so I love the idea. I'm glad we're able to move fast and figure this out. Thank you, Andrew, and your team. I would only ask if we can put as much effort as we can. I know it's difficult kind of working with vendors and knowing exactly when they start. They're trying to find ways to communicate to the trucking companies, the haulers, it's just so they know there's going to be some days there might be a major delay. If there's paving, maybe there won't be. But if there is, to make sure we can kind of get that out so people can make their business decisions. That'd be my only thing. If it's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 weeks, my only suggestion.
Matt, and then Erica.
You go to Erica, please. I'll come back.
I was just going to say that the contractor already notified us today. That's how I learned of the project, and it was going to be part of my weekly blast to all the truckers and haulers, so they'll get notice, and they're supposed to start on Monday.
Thank you, Erica. Matt?
Yeah, I don't like things at the last minute. I always whine and complain, but this is a good thing, and I'm not going to whine and complain. This is where if you come off of Monomoy, it's dangerous to go across the street to then cross it again. So if you're on a bike, you go along the road and you get yelled at the entire time with everyone telling you to get back on the bike path, get off the road. You know, even though you're only going a quarter of a mile and you have every right to be there as they do, they still yell at you and beep at you. So this is amazing, and I'm glad we do it. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Judith Wagner.
I just wanted to say, as a member of the Planning Board and NPDC, how much we appreciate your consideration of this and the work Andrew and Rob have been doing to try to find ways to push ahead despite the COVID situation. I agree with what everybody has said about the danger area there, and we've been trying to foster safe biking in a lot of different ways, but I just wanted to say thank you for your consideration and to praise Andrew and Rob for bringing this forward.
Thank you. Thomas Barada.
Yes. What is the price tag on this emergency project that's going to start on Monday?
Andrew?
So this section can be done at about 120,000.
Did you have any other questions?
Nope. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we go to a vote?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, by roll call, Melissa Murphy.
Aye.
Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Thank you very much. Looking
Thank
forward.
you. Thank you all.
Our next agenda item is approval of minutes. We've got a couple of minutes, payroll warrants, treasury warrants, and pending contracts. So we can take them all as one motion unless anyone wants to pull anything out for changes or comments or questions.
Move approval.
Madam Chair, you have a question from someone, which I think has to do with pending contracts. So I don't know if you want to do 1 through 3 first.
Let's do a motion on 1 through 3 if that's okay.
Move approval on 1 through 3.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Melissa Murphy.
Aye.
Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Mr. Barada, what's your question on pending contracts? You're muted.
My question is in regard to 39 Washington Street for a new roof. I understand that we're ripping the roof off and redoing sheathing and insulation and downspouts on that building. Does that roof currently leak at the moment?
Madam Chair, Rob could probably speak to that. My understanding is that it is prone to leaking.
Rob?
Yes. So that roof right now currently leaks. We had issues with it that were repaired a year or two ago. Very minor repair. The building itself, if you've been in it, needs some serious work. This facility is in sore need of a new roof. We've had issues that have been caused by the leaking, including some collapsed ceilings. And as you know, this houses lifeguards, women lifeguards in the summer. This is a project for some. And was intended to be completed before summer. Went out to bid, and the low responsive and responsible bidder was just over $90,000. There was a lower bidder, but unfortunately that person had left off a statutory requirement in their submitted package. And therefore, the finance director was not able to award the contract to them.
Tom, did that answer your question?
Well, is the 95,000 also going to include fixing the interior from the fallen ceilings and everything else and bringing it back up to habitable condition, or are we going to be coming back again to do the interior later?
Rob, is there anything else that
This interior repairs have been completed by DPW. There's some additional work that's unrelated to the roofing, some electrical and plumbing work that's been done. So the 95 is specifically for roof work. And I'm happy to, either myself or the finance director could certainly supply the scope, the detailed scope of that job if anyone's interested.
Thank you.
That scope has already been provided.
Thank you.
Does the board have any questions on that or want to go to a vote? Is there a motion?
Motion to.
I'll move approval. I looked at the scope, and originally I thought if we were just shingling it, that was 4 times what it should have been. But when I looked at the scope of work and what they're doing, it's a hair high, but it needs to be done. So I move approval.
It's too far off for us having other housing solutions for these employees.
Exactly.
And it is more, I had this in the same initial reaction.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor by roll call: Melissa Murphy.
Aye.
Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Matt Fay.
Aye.
Christy Garcia.
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. And I did forget to go back to Burton Balkind. I think he had a public comment for something that's otherwise not on our agenda.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm actually going to talk to you guys on behalf of the Nantucket Coastal Conservancy. We refer to members of the board, letters sent to the board from the Conservation Commission on April 16th of this year. You may recall the commission was writing to inform you of multiple violations that have occurred on beach property owned by the town, adjacent to Baxter Road, below the bluff. This property is subject to an order of conditions issued to the Sconset Beach Preservation Fund for the construction and ongoing maintenance of the geotube structure. This letter states no other project during this time frame has received more than one enforcement action, and no other cease and desist orders have been violated. The Concom is concerned that there's a pattern of not being able to follow the conditions of the permit and wanted to make the select board as the property owners and license holder aware of the multiple violations. The commission is taking steps to ensure that this type of behavior is not able to continue, but is requesting your aid in ensuring this case. And the commission would be happy to discuss this with the select board, but strongly encourage the board to take significant action to protect the fragile resources. That was a letter from the Concom to you. Secondly, the Nantucket Coastal Conservancy has requested you please put an update on the status of the relocation of the Baxter Road on the agenda soon. We note that telling you that you will be meeting an executive session tomorrow to consider litigation related to this matter. We respectfully make this request again that you put it on a future agenda, please. And then thirdly, last week, the Nantucket Coastal Conservancy sent a written communication to members of the board with a copy to the town manager about the fact that the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee, otherwise known as CRAC, has not been allowed by town administration to participate in the selection of a consultant to develop the coastal resiliency plan for Nantucket, even though they specifically requested to do so in January. And we, the Nantucket Coastal Conservancy, asked 2 questions. Why were there no representatives of CRAC allowed to participate in this process, and who made the decision not to include any representatives from CRAC? We have not received any responses from you, but the town manager did send us an email that did not answer all the questions, but we appreciate her getting back to us. And we feel that the CRAC is a very important advisory committee, and will you please put this matter on an upcoming agenda so that we can discuss it as a public and and find out what's going on with the cracks role going forward. Thank you very much for your time, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We'll get you updates on those. Consent items. We have a gift acceptance for the fire department.
Motion
to approve. Oh, I'll second.
All those in favor by roll call: Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Lisa Bridges, Matt Fee,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. Carries unanimously. We have a resignation from the Historic District Commission Associate. TJ Watterson has decided to step down, so there will be a vacancy there. Let's make a motion to thank him for his service and send him a letter to that effect.
So moved.
Make that motion. Yeah, second.
All those in favor by roll call: Melissa Murphy,
What?
Aye.
Lisa Bridges, Matt Fee,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously. Citizen departmental request. Town clerk, request for approval warrant for Tuesday, September 1, 2020, state election primary. Nancy Holmes, I see you on there.
Hi, can you hear me, Dawn?
I can hear you.
Okay.
I can see you.
This is thanks. This is just routine. The signing of the warrant, which is required to be posted 7 days prior to the actual primary date of September 1st.
I just want to note too that the warrant needs to be signed with original wet signatures. We have 5 copies here in the office, so if everyone can try to get by in the next couple of days to get that done, that would be great.
I'll come in and sign those tomorrow.
Also, Dawn, I don't know if this is later in the agenda. I'm sorry, I don't have the agenda for tonight in front of me. I'm trying to pull it up, but Libby had said that some members of the board might have questions regarding the difference between early and absentee voting, and I'm happy to answer any of those now or later in the meeting.
Give us a quick update on that now, and I think that will, then you don't have to stay on.
Sure. So the state has expanded the allowance of early or vote by mail voting because of the pandemic. So there has never been more ways to vote. Many of you may have gotten a little postcard in the mail that was sent to every registered voter in the Commonwealth, unless you had already applied for an absentee ballot, in which case they didn't send you one of those little postcards. We've already received, I want to say as of today, over 1,200 in the office, so we're really busy processing because we have to enter each one of those ballot applications. Or people may have already applied or can continue to apply for an absentee ballot. The short answer is, when it comes to the ballot itself, there is absolutely no difference. If you're going to vote by mail, whether it's early or absentee, you're going to get a ballot, and at the top of the ballot, it will say early/absentee ballot. The content is the same. You know, it's a primary, so you have to choose. If you're in a party, you'll get your party's ballot. If not, you have to choose Democrat, Republican, Green Rainbow, or Libertarian. The slight difference is to apply, it's very confusing to people, but to apply for an absentee ballot, you're saying, I'm out of town. I'm out of town on the day of the election. I can't come to the polls. So you have to state that. But again, due to COVID, the state has expanded vote by mail or early ballot. It's the same thing. So it's a no excuses type of balloting. You don't have to say I'm away. You're just saying I want to vote by mail. That being said, you can do what's best for you as an individual. The polls are still open on election day from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. like they always are, if you prefer to vote in person. Or again, under state requirement, we will have early voting in office the week before the primary. And that will be in late August. It's going to be posted. The dates and times are going to be posted on the website very soon. They're also going to be advertised in the paper, but they have been established, and this has all been happening very quickly as the state is working to keep up to these new regulations that were just passed in July, or new statute actually at the state level. So if anybody has any particular questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Everybody good? Should we take a vote on?
Dawn, I'm sorry, I had a question for Nancy. It's Melissa. That's okay. Thank you, Nancy, for that. I just wanted to let you know that I had heard from a couple of constituents in the last election cycle that perhaps they were confused about the request that they made, either for early or absentee, and their ballots didn't arrive in time. And when they contacted the office, I guess either, and I don't know which one they had selected, but whichever one they had selected, they said you can't come to vote at the polls today because your ballot is out in the mail. And so they weren't actually able to cast a vote. And
yeah.
So it was me that asked that question, because I think, given the mail issues that we've been encountering recently, that's more of a concern for a big national election.
Right. I'm actually glad that you brought that up, because things have changed so quickly. Again, as we all know, as it has on the town level too, everything due to COVID. And that's true. As of the March primary and the June election, or June 16th election, if you requested an early ballot, even if you unfortunately never got it, or you got it, I had someone come to the polls, they got it, and they said, oh, I want to go to the polls. You weren't allowed to vote, which I think was very unfair. So, at the request of a lot of clerks in particular, because there were a few people that were upset. There weren't too many in that situation, but there was a few. Now, if you requested an early ballot and you have not returned it, in other words, it hasn't come to the clerk's office and we haven't logged it in, because each ballot is logged in and logged out on a state system. If we haven't logged it in and you come to the polls on primary day or election day and you say, I'm here to vote, if you haven't returned your ballot, you can vote. So that is new as of the July statute that passed at the state level. And the other small thing I wanted to point out, there's never been more ways to vote. And by the amount of applications we've received, a lot of people, their preference is to vote by mail, and it's personal. For whatever reason, they would like to do that. And it's a great opportunity. There is a small risk that you won't get your ballot. Last time, I would say, in June, we mailed out for our town election over 800 early and absentee ballots. We have never sent out that many. I would say maybe 5 people never received their ballot. The ballots were taking a long time to arrive, I have to admit, and in some instances, but not all. Some people on Nantucket would have it in 3 days, and other people it took 12. But far and wide, people got their ballots, they voted them, they returned them, they were logged in. But I just want to say that, and that there is a small risk. And if you don't get your ballot and you think you should have had it by now, please call or email us. And we can always cancel it out and send another.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Could I have a motion to approve the warrant for Tuesday, September 1st?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Melissa Murphy.
Aye.
Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Kathy.
Aye.
Christy Carantella.
Aye.
Bob Holgate, aye. And we will sign those. Thank you, Nancy. Next is a request from Victor Brandon Corp. Request for waiver of town noise bylaw to allow installation of road striping markings on Milestone Road the nights of Thursday, August 20th and Friday, August 21st. Are there any questions, Jason?
I think this is a great idea. What I was concerned about, with the bike path being extended, the Monomoy Rotary, is the traffic congestion in August, and so I think people will be especially the business community who's out there, caretakers, haulers, all, plumbers, everybody's out moving around. This will be better for them. So if there's any other discussion, I can make the motion to approve. Oh, sorry, Kristen.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I had a concern about it being on a Friday night, and I just didn't know if there could be clarification about why this has to be a Thursday. Sorry, why it has to be a Friday.
Lauren?
Hi, so I am the assistant project manager for this Mass DOT job. So unfortunately, due to the fact that the 3 trucks are coming over, they have to come hazmat because of what they're carrying. And we could not get any other availability other than those 2 days. So what I've worked out with Markings Inc. is they will be mobilized and ready to start work approximately 7 p.m., 7:15 on Thursday, work through the night, work all day Friday, work into Friday evening, and be gone by Saturday morning. They'll be on the first boats out.
Thank you.
No problem.
Is there a second to Jason's motion?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Melissa Murphy?
Aye.
Jason Bridges?
Aye.
Matt Fay?
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella?
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Next up, we have Anderson Krieger LLP, request for consent to represent Act Now regarding regulation of short-term rentals. I think this request is because they have a legal relationship with the airport, and we need to sign off on it because we approved that relationship. And John Giorgio is here, and Nina Pickering Cook from Anderson and Krieger is here, and Julia Lindner is here from Act Now. I don't know if the board really has questions about this or if we want to just go to a vote.
I have Madam Chair, if I may, I have a whole spiel in background on why this is really just a technicality in that Anderson Krieger doesn't actually represent the town in any significant way. But if the board has no questions on that front, I don't need to keep you longer.
Yeah, I was going to save some time we certainly needed to do this, but I'm not sure that anyone actually has a concern, but that's what I'm trying to find out right now.
Right.
Matt?
Yeah, I think it's just a technicality. I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor by roll call, Melissa Murphy?
Aye.
Jason Bridges?
Aye.
Matt Fay?
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella?
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. So thank you for being
prepared
with the spiel, but we're good. Thank you as well. Next up, we have Habitat for Humanity request for waiver of sewer connection permit fees and sewer capacity fees for a duplex at 31 Beachgrass Road.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So this is just a standard sewer fee waiver request, talking again about the duplex project that Habitat is doing within the Richmond development. Your practice in the past has been to grant both the connection and privilege fee waivers to Habitat. We are asking that you would tonight.
Matt?
I'll move approval of both, as we have in the past.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Melissa Murphy?
Aye.
Jason Bridges?
Aye.
Matt Fay?
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella?
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Sandy Pedals Bike Share review status of proposal, request for approval of locations on town property and or memorandum of understanding, license for use of town property.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to address this. As you know, through the past, 6 months or the past year, we've been talking about this and approved the application from Sandy Pedals back earlier this year, which seems a long time ago. to move forward. Thomas Holt is on this call as well, who is from Sandy Petals. And at that time, we had approved the idea of the bike share with the addition of more details as far as staging of bikes and the whole operation. Obviously, with the onset of COVID and these restrictions, that got delayed. Mr. Holt is now, at the time, had requested to put out approximately 100, 125 bikes at various locations, and has moved back to 50 since we're going to try to do something a little bit smaller and slower due to the situation. So real quick, I'm going to go over, and I know we included Mr. Holt's update on locations in the packet, but I wanted to go over just the three things really we look at and what the town needs to be concerned with in this type of proposal. With the bike share, he is going to have two things. He's going to have hub locations, as was shown in a lot of those locations that he had proposed, which is where these bikes are staged, where they would be in the morning first thing, where they'd be repositioned, where people who went on the app would go to select to pick up a bike. That is going to be the main thing we would be concerned about or have an agreement with for public property. He also has some locations, and again, Thomas, I'll let you chime in when I'm done here, but it would be for public locations that we would look at and make an agreement for. And so we're still reviewing those. That is going to be the number one thing we would be concerned with, because that is conducting commercial activity on public property. That is where they're staged and located. The second thing is the destination locations that he will put in the app, as far as where folks might drop off a bike, leave a bike, take a Uber back home, or whatever the case may be if they don't want to take the bike back to the hub location. If there's an existing bike rack, obviously folks can use existing bike racks as they would in any other case. In this case, they should be there only approximately 4 hours. There should be a notification to the vendor to pick those bikes up and bring them back, do a sanitization, and repurpose them or reposition them to the hub location. So those are the two things. As far as his locations, we requested more details from him on that. We've been doing that throughout and trying to figure that out. It's a kind of a little bit all over the board. The private locations certainly aren't something we have to be worried about, but we're kind of looking at the public location, and most especially the locations he's requesting to add bike racks. That's something we're trying to work out. It's been a little bit difficult. It's been, for us, it seems a little bit kind of, fly by the seat of your pants. And that's a little bit of a concern, is because luckily it's only 50 bikes, but we don't want it to turn into a mess that we're going to have to deal with. So that's why we've been a little bit tough on that. The other concern here is a sanitization protocol that I don't think we've seen. Obviously, once a bike is used and left somewhere, it should be taken and sanitized and brought back in some sort of plan in that case, and not re-rented until that time occurs. So those are things we're actually still looking for. I know DPW is looking at some of these cases too as well, and all the locations that were included we don't agree with. So what I would say here is we're looking to give you an update. We'll let Mr. Holt speak to this as well. But I would like to see a little bit more tightening of some of these locations before we actually have you agree to a final MOU on this situation. So I can let Mr. Holt chime in too, as well as far as his plans.
Hi, how are y'all? So as far as the list of properties that I sent out or sent to Amy Baxter, I'm pretty sure I sent it to the select board as well. But this is all, I mean, like Amy said, you all approved me as the one to speak to about moving forward with this pilot project. The pilot project got postponed due to COVID, and everyone needs to understand that. Now we're having this conversation. the properties that I proposed to Amy and the assistant town manager and the public works director were all what I would consider some. I guess what I'm trying to get at is focused to the most condensed population of people so that it is readily available for people to use to commute with. I initially started thinking that like having it out at the beaches would be cool, but those are more destination spots. Keeping it in town close to people's residences is the best thing for everybody. As far as refining all of the spots, like Amy said, it's something that the conversation needs to continue. And what I'm looking for right now is for an acceptance of, I guess, approval of some of these, if not all of them, to move forward, or adapting the ones that are proposed to you to better suit what the town would, what would work best for the town. I don't have, I mean, flying by the seat of my pants, I don't know if that is really what I'm doing right now, but I have technology to support the idea that this all can be controlled by your phone at any point at any given time. And it's just a matter of what the town really wants to use or allocate access to. I can, you know, if we want to, I mean, I don't want to get into the debate of Uber versus what I'm doing, but, you know, like public property is being used for private enterprise at those points. And so you sit back and you go, okay, where do you draw the line? And that's what I'm really asking for is, instead of asking forgiveness, I'm coming to you all to say, hey, let's approve everything, and I want to be above board. I want to enter this project with complete compliance, so no one is upset as to where we are moving forward. And I'll open it up to any questions that you all have.
Jason and Matt.
Sorry for the ramble.
And then Matt, you both raised your hand.
Thanks, Tom, for being here tonight. I think one of the things that I'm guessing that Amy and Rob and town are dealing with is, we know there'd be your bike racks on town property. So I think we have to think through that. Liability, if someone gets hurt, it's your property on our property. And I don't remember that being part of the proposal. I thought you were maybe going to use town racks that were existing at, say, like Surfside and Jetties, and that made sense to me. That's kind of what you were saying about Uber and those type of things use public property. You would be able to use that. So I think that's one of the things that we have to work out. And so I think the private locations, obviously go for it. And the public locations, I think, for me, I think we just have to work it out. And I would refer to town staff.
So I, and sorry to interrupt anyone else, but Jason, to that point, I got in touch with, well, first HDC to get rack approval, and they sent me to Rob McNeil, and he was like, we have bollards or we have this rack that are approved currently. And I don't mind purchasing the approved racks for the spots that don't have racks. I'm looking at using the racks that are already existing. And for spots that don't have existing racks, I, as Sandy Pedals, the company, would purchase those racks for those locations.
Okay, that's helpful. And those racks will look like all the other racks on the island?
They would be the DPW HDT or HTC approved racks.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you. Matt?
Yeah, I think we're in all in agreement. We're all in support, Tom. I think the key here is to finalize with Amy and the town. You know, you're saying you want everyone to be on the same page. Well, I would say take a little more time, get on the same page, and we'll vote for it. Yeah, that's my sense.
Amy? Amy, you're muted.
Sorry. So I think, thank you for that. And I think what we're looking to do is a slow rollout here as well. Like I said, the most important things to really tie down are the hub locations where these folks or where these bikes will be staged, and making sure in appropriate places and done appropriately. And those are the most important parts. Obviously, existing racks people can go to. They can be destinations right now, though they can be used by anyone. So we start with that and then add locations as we can, you know, and in those places we need to put racks and things like that. And it might be a layered approach, like we try to do things and see how this goes. Just like we've been doing with the streets and everything else, we start with what we can do right now, which I think is best. And then we can certainly add locations as it goes. And if, you know, more bikes and things of that sort come in, we can do. But I think we do have a lot of existing that can be used, and hopefully that'll help us just get it kicked off and move on from there, if that sounds appropriate with everyone.
That sounds fair to me. Christy, and then Rick Atherton has his hand raised.
Yeah, I think that sounds good, Amy. I'm just wondering, can Tom start using the bikes, or do we need to sign the MOU first? I just want to understand how we're going to do a slow roll of what we could have approved tonight.
Right. I think, yeah, I wasn't ready to have you sign an MOU just yet. I think, and Tom can, after I speak here, can correct me, was looking to have them on island about the 14th of August or in that time frame. I think certainly if he was doing private location hubs, he can certainly start with those. Like he's been talking about a couple that sounded good locations and had that approval and written approval. He could certainly start doing that. So I think it's something we can do in the next week and get that finalized, at least on the very basic level, and then add from there. So that would be my guess.
Rick Atherton, did you have a comment on that?
I just clicked. Okay.
Oh, Rick, your sound is.
Am I?
You are echoing like you wouldn't believe.
Maybe if there's too much echo, I'm going to stop. Deanne, I think that's you, so I'm going to stop. I'll stop. Thank you.
Let's have two volumes on.
Try again. Can we try again?
Oh, that's much better.
Is this better, dear Dawn?
Yes, that's much better. Thank you. Go ahead. Go ahead, Rick.
Sorry, I'm lost, Deanne.
No, you're good now. Go ahead. Rick? Hello?
I have absolutely no idea.
Rick, we can hear you. Go ahead.
It was the back.
Yes, Rick, you're good. Go ahead.
Oh, Dawn, I'm sorry.
Yes, go ahead. We can hear you. You're clear now.
Well, I apologize. I think we had a couple of computers going. Just a general observation. I went to your packet and I found it instructive. The number of spaces for this bike program were overwhelming and suggest to me that you really need to go slow to consider how the use of town space by a vendor, and I don't know if this is exclusive or not, maybe I missed that, affects other bike rental businesses on the island. It's really extremely extensive, the number of locations. So I just suggest the board take their time and think this through very clearly. Thank you.
Tom and Jason both had their hands, and Christy all have their hands raised. Tom, I'll go to you first. Tom, you're muted.
Done. Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Rick, just a response to your concern there. As a bicycle mechanic and working in the bike industry on this island for close to 15 years now, the use of every single bike rack, whether it be private or public on this island, what I'm suggesting the use that the town gives me is about 5%. So the extent with my 50 bicycles as a pilot project for this first year is almost inconsequential to the bicycle rental industry in a whole for Nantucket itself. Yes, I myself, as a new business owner, am trying to put a foothold and make space for myself. The complication right now is asking the town for a little bit of help. But if you start diving deep into the understanding of how the private bicycle businesses run their operations, they are still using public property to operate their business. They're just not asking permission to do so. And I should say the greatest complication is they're not actually conducting the business as far as the act and the transaction happening on public land. Their transaction is happening in their retail space. But I do know that if a bike is left on a public bike rack, they charge the individual for the pickup on that spot. Again, the transaction is still in their brick and mortar.
Jason keeps waving at me. I'm going to go to him.
All right.
Tom, I don't want you to go down the whole, too far there. I think I was actually going to say what you were going to say is the bike rental shops and bike tour companies use all those racks and all the racks that Tom's not even proposing, right? So the bike rental companies are already using all the public spaces. It's just not organized like this. And to your question, Rick, and other people who may be thinking this, BPAC, which Matt is on from NBC, and myself and the other 5 members, talked to Tom with Amy, with Rob for over a year. Young's Bicycle Shop came in a lot. Tobias came in a lot. Like, we really hashed all this out to try to understand it. And I also think that you might propose these 30 bike racks and only 10 are used. Like, it's a bit of an experiment, and you might come back in 3 months or a year and revamp it all. So I just wanted to make that clear. Kind of wondering if we really vetted this. BPAC really dug into this for probably maybe 18 months.
Well, it's very fluid.
No, Tom, I'm going to go to Christy. I'm just going to put her hands raised. Christy.
Yeah. Thank you. I was just going to comment too that I think with Rick's question might be imagining kind of what we see in cities where you have, the company bikes all lined up. And that's, I don't think what Tom is proposing. It's just being able to use these different spaces. So with 50 bikes across like 20 bike racks, there might only be 2 sandy pedal bikes and the rest are filled with everybody else. So it wouldn't be completely filled with sandy pedal bike racks. Otherwise, I think that would be a completely different conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Tom, do you have anything to add? I think that we're pretty clear.
I'd like to add one thing, and that is that Amy is a rock star, and I'm sorry that this was thrown back on her plate. I feel like she has way too much, and this is something that she has been awesome working with me doing, and I really appreciate it. That's all.
3 minutes of it, Tom.
What?
So I think that I'm seeing consensus that we're having to move forward based on how Amy recommends that this all be finalized. So can we leave it at that for tonight?
Yep.
Okay. Moving on to, thank you, Tom, for being here and for all your work on this. It's been extensive. Committee reports. Affordable Housing Trust review of final draft request for proposals, document for Neighborhood First program, dispersed site real estate purchases and development, request for select board comments. I know Tucker Holland is here and Brian Sullivan, the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, is here.
That's correct, Madam.
Or the vice chair, I believe. Who wants to?
I'll kick it off, and we also have Christy Ferrantella, who served both on the Neighborhood First Advisory Committee as well as sits on the Affordable Housing Trust for the Select Board. So, I mean, we're very pleased to have this opportunity to present this document to you. You may recall from your January meeting where the Neighborhood First Advisory Committee and Affordable Housing Trust had presented their initial report and strategy document. There were 3 strategies identified with regard to the deployment of the Neighborhood First funds. The 3 strategies are dispersed site purchases and development, buy down of existing year-round rentals, and multiple pocket developments. And so the recent Orange Street acquisitions would be an example of that 3rd strategy. So what we have before you tonight is under strategy number 1, the dispersed site purchases and development. You've seen the RFP. There are a number of criteria by which the proposals will be evaluated. We've had the opportunity to share this document not only amongst the trust members, but with the Neighborhood First Advisory Committee, as well as the Finance Committee. The Finance Director has reviewed and commented. The one change that isn't reflected in the document that you have before you is there's simply a numeric edit on page 1 with respect to the proper section of 30B governing real estate transactions. So it's rather than section 6, it should read section 16. But otherwise, we have no additional changes at this point beyond what you all would like to discuss and suggest this evening. We have had the opportunity to reach out to Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee. There is a Coastal Resiliency Sustainability evaluation criteria incorporated. We very much appreciate Vince providing evaluation language for that. And, we think that this document will hopefully elicit a lot of interest amongst property owners on the island who would like to consider being a part of this program. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brian to say a few words.
Thank you, Tucker. Through you, Chair, just general comments. I'd like to thank staff first, the advisory committee for coming together and volunteering their time to the Neighborhood First group to put the document together and make the recommendations. We are enthusiastic to get the RFP out there in hopes of generating enough interest that we're able to make some purchases working through the finance department and the proper procurement process. This has been a long haul to get here. We're very excited to get here, get it published, and start the ability to market it in hopes that we get some proposals. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Christy or Brooke, did you want to add anything? I was really pleased with the way the whole RFP was written. I hope that in this crazy real estate market, some people do submit proposals. Anybody else? Matt?
I guess you guys are looking for comments. I'll make a couple. One, the RFP, I was very happy to see that you can back out for any reason, and you have language that you don't have to take even the highest bidder. I think that was smart, because you may find, as you know, you may find something that's really attractive that's slightly higher. And I think it's important to have the flexibility, because there's a lot of criteria, and that's number one. Number two, it's kind of nitpicking, but under your energy efficiency criteria, you talk about, I think it was, the older houses you say aren't any good. I think that the houses before 1950 or 1960 or 1950 before are a lot better than the stuff built from 60 to 80, to 80 or 90. And I think they're very easily, they've got open cavities. The framing is great. If you get any of those cottages, I think they should be given a higher mark, not a lower mark. Having moved a couple myself, they are, I wouldn't want to move anything from sort of the 80s, 90s, 2000s, but some of the really early ones, I think are great. And the only question I kind of had was, there could be a potential conflict, and Dawn kind of alluded to it, because talking about the crazy real estate market. Let's just pretend someone with a 5-acre parcel that isn't on the market gives it to this committee, and or says, "Hey, I'm interested in selling this 5-acre parcel here on, in the Mid-Island." How do you guys address the fact that as soon as that's out, the sharks will be swirling? How do you ensure that that doesn't get snapped up? Have you guys had that discussion?
Do you guys want to comment on that? I wanted to make just one quick comment on the first thing that Matt said. I totally agree on the construction of those older buildings. But if we're putting these into inventory for rental, lead paint is a very big concern. And that would have to include some kind of lead paint inspection protocol before those could be utilized. Brian or Tucker?
So Tucker, if I may, just very quickly, Matt, it's a great question. It's very difficult in this environment with the way the rumor mill spreads to keep any property opportunity quiet. The hope is with the RFP that the seller's intended interest, in hopes to see it moving in the direction of an affordable housing opportunity for the community, serves both their financial interest and their greater social interest, and would hopefully work with us exclusively until a period that they were not able to work with us, and then go out to the open market. The process is not nearly as fluid as the private real estate market, or it does not move as quickly. And that has been the greatest challenge leading up to this point. Just to get to here to put an RFP out has taken weeks, if not months. It's very difficult to negotiate in the private market as a community, and all of you know that. So, Matt, I don't have a great answer, and it's hopefully the goodwill of the seller to try and create a net benefit for the community and a financial benefit for themselves.
Well, yeah. And I brought an opportunity. The town couldn't move quick enough. Tuck and I talked about it. I'm sure you're aware of it. And then it got snapped up at a great price, and sort of blocked and sort of the primo part of the property was purchased. And long story short, I just think that that isn't the last time it's going to happen. I think there's got to be some way that you guys can be nimble enough to put down some earnest money, or take this off the market somehow, or the really good ones are going to get scooped by people.
And part of this process, Matt, is part of the procurement process that the finance department needs us to work through to create a, forgive me, Brian, the word's not coming to me, but to prove that the properties are unique in every way. So we need to survey the community to make sure that there aren't multiple opportunities like the one, to be able to meet the requirements of the municipality for uniqueness. And this RFP is part of that process. I pass to Tucker through the chair.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, I mean, the example that Mr. Fee was just, talking about, I mean, yeah, and we had 10 days notice basically, and the town can't move that quickly on a real estate transaction. But I think someone who be putting forward a proposal under this program, as Brian said, I think is probably, may well have considered or even had their property, listed or in the open market, and are deciding to put forward under this because it's more than about the money. It's about how their property will end up being used and contributing to the year-round community going forward. And to address a comment of the chairs, yeah, there isn't a perfect metric on the energy evaluation aspect, but we did want to hold a place for that. And as you can see in the RFP, following submissions and selection, we would enter into a purchase and sale, which may be the mechanism that keeps it exclusive at that point, to Mr. Fee's point, subject to all of the standard caveats in a P&S, such as inspection and appraisal and so forth. So items like lead paint and so forth would come out during the process.
I guess I have a question for John Giorgio, if I could then. Is there a way where someone is entering this process and they are signing something that says that the town has first dibs on this until the process is over? Is there a way can we structure it in such a way that they are, they're entering the process for a set amount of time?
Well, Matt, I think that would be part of the purchase and sale agreement. Are you saying in lieu of a purchase and sale agreement? Because
I'm saying prior to the purchase and sale, because what will happen as soon as some of the really good parcels are offered, so people are going to look at that and go, geez, that would be great. I'll go offer them even more than the town will offer. I'll go, I can do it quicker. I don't have to wait for a town meeting vote. And they're going to step right in and scoop the town. And so I'm saying, is there a way that if they make this application, say I'm selling my property, I say, hey guys, I've got 1.5 acres on Fairgrounds. I want to sell it to you. I can't then, until the process is done, I can't sell it to somebody else.
So Matt, you would immediately execute a purchase and sale agreement. And that agreement, although it has contingencies on the town side, i.e. town meeting approval, clear record title, all the standard things, it's still a binding contract that between the town and the seller of the property. And so if you lock them in writing, even with those contingencies, then they're obligated to sell the property to the town for the price specified. So you have to be ready to move quickly as soon as the proposals are opened.
Yeah, I'm not explaining myself very well. Then so maybe Don can help me. Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a tough one because people can easily trump when they can move more quickly.
Madam Chair. So I think, what you're saying, Matt, what I'm hearing you say is that because there is a public opening process to all submissions, and therefore everyone as of 1 p.m. On Thursday, October 22nd, is going to know who submitted. What you're asking, I think, is can the simple act of submitting bind someone to work with us until such point we say we don't want to work with you?
Exactly.
That's your question.
Thank you.
And I'm not the guy for the answer.
John.
Yeah, I think that's going to, I mean, obviously the problem that we have is the Chapter 30B and the requirements under that. You know, the only way that I think you could effectively do that would be really outside the norms of a real estate transaction by trying to have them post some kind of, you know, like on a normal procurement, you require a bid bond be submitted at the time that that you submit your proposal, and that bid bond obligates you to essentially fulfill your the obligations of the offer that you're making. And if you don't agree to enter into the contract based upon your proposal, then the town has some form of security that the town could call if you wind up selling to someone else. I've never seen a bid bond submitted in connection with a real estate transaction, but it's maybe something we could take a look at. It will, one of the problems with a bid bond is it will cost money for an individual to go out and purchase that bond as part of the bid submission process. And if you're talking about individual homeowners, that could very well drive people away from submitting a bid. That's the problem you're going to run into.
I don't even know if if a bond is necessary. I almost think they sign something saying, on this application, I've submitted and I agree I will not place my property on the market for the next 2 months, while this process is underway. Thank you very much. I mean, I think and that may not be 100% binding, but you'd look like a schmuck if you did it, and anyone that stepped in would look like a schmuck if they stepped in. So I'm just trying to think of what's going to be the issues, and I think I could see this being a big issue.
So I guess we could look at a certification executed by the bidder at the time of bid submission that basically certifies that they will not negotiate or accept an offer to purchase, essentially giving the town an exclusive period. And then, of course, once you sign the purchase and sale agreement, then they're locked in. So we could look at some kind of a certification to that effect. I don't know, again, whether the risk again would be depressing the bidding climate. So you may get fewer bids in that regard. But it's, that's something we could certainly look at.
Are there any other comments? Tucker?
If I could, I just would like to mention the dates out loud here for those that are viewing. So with the intention of taking in any further comments addressing the issue that Mr. Fee has brought up with Town Council, making the change that I mentioned earlier, the intention is to issue the RFP next Wednesday, the 12th. And we are going to be doing a public information session on Thursday, August 27th at 5:30 p.m. It will be done by Zoom. It will be broadcast live on NCTV 18 and available for on demand on YouTube following that. But that is an opportunity for anyone at all to ask any question at all about the program, the process, and so forth. So we would encourage people to participate on Thursday, August 27th at the 5:30 timeframe to learn more about the program and ask anything they want if they have any interest at all in potentially putting in a proposal. There will be an inquiry deadline of September 30th. That means that not all questions need to be asked at that August 27th meeting. Questions can still come following that date up until September 30th. If you are interested or think you are interested in putting in a proposal, you will want to register. And again, it's all contained in the RFP how to do this. But if you are registered for this RFP, if you will, then you will automatically receive all information related to this. So if someone sends in a question regarding the RFP that you didn't ask, you will receive you will know the question and the answer, so that you have the same information that everyone else is considering has, if you are registered. So it would be important to register by September 20th. Proposals will be due Thursday over 10 a.m. in the morning. I cannot stress enough the importance of submitting a proposal on time. If a proposal is turned in 10 minutes after 10 a.m. on that date, it will not be able to be accepted. Finally, the proposals will be opened, as I mentioned earlier, at 1 p.m. that same day, under the guidance of the procurement officer. And it would be the intention to select about December 16th, hard and fast date, but we'll give some guidance. Thank you.
Rick Atherton and Deanne Atherton both have their hands raised. Rick is first.
Your sound up and go.
Well, Deanne, I don't know. Okay, there we go. Dawn, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Great, thank you. Just a general comment. If I understood correctly, this RFP is related to one strategy as worked out by the Neighborhood First Committee, not the other strategies. But my concern all along, and I've been very public about this, is that the intent of the article was to buy single-family dwelling units dispersed around the island. And I believe any use of the proceeds for the kind of project, unfortunately, here I go, I'm off of Orange Street, across from Marine Home Center, are not within the appropriate understanding that town meeting undertook to approve the Neighborhood First $20 million expenditures. And just to be absolutely clear, I spoke with town council when he was available to review potential citizen articles and asked him about how one would go about asking the town meeting to rescind that article because the town was not following the spirit and the intent of the article. So I just want to make sure people understand that in your discussions of this RFP and any other future RFPs for spending the $20 million appropriated by town meeting. Thank you.
Did Deanne want to say something too?
It looks like she has logged off.
Okay.
She's might come back on.
Are there any additional comments or feedback on the RFP?
Rich raised his hand again. Oh, no, I didn't.
Okay. Everyone comfortable? Okay, then
Rick has his hand again. No, he doesn't.
I don't see it. Oh, Rick, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Dawn, it's Deanne. We're having
Deanne, go ahead.
commuter problems. I just have a question for, I guess it would be Tucker, but I'd like to know who will be serving on the review committee that will review the proposals that are submitted in response to the RFP?
Yes, thank you. Question through there. So committee appointment is a responsibility of, and so I would at that committee maybe. I'm sorry.
You're breaking up.
Can you hear me now?
I can, yeah.
I'm sorry. I'll start. So the review is a responsibility of the chief procurement officer. I would expect that it may be a 7-member type of committee with broad representation, including perhaps the representatives from the trust, perhaps the neighborhood, perhaps the select board, finance committee. So the exact not yet, but again, that would be ultimately determined by the chief procurement officer.
Deanne, was that your only question? Okay, is everyone comfortable if we move on to the next agenda item? We don't need to take a vote, right? You just wanted our feedback? Oh, Rick
Yes.
has his hand up again, or maybe it's Deanne.
Dawn, I'm so sorry. I apologize for the snafu. I just want to be certain I understand Tucker's response, that then the review committee would not be made up solely of staff members.
It's the committee makeup is ultimately the responsibility of the chief procurement officer. So I can't say exactly how the committee would be made up, but I would think that it may be something along the lines of what I just described, but it hasn't been determined yet by the chief procurement officer.
Jason?
Do we know when that decision will be made? In the next month, next couple of weeks? Just to give a basic time frame.
Yeah, I mean, I think perhaps it would be something that is determined over the course of the next 2 or 3 weeks. We want the group to be assembled and ready to do their work. So something like that.
Yeah, I think it's important that it's a broad representation like that, so that if we go to town meeting and somebody is trying to stop the program, that we've got enough broad representation that it goes forward.
Absolutely.
Okay. Deanne, did you have a follow-up? The hand is still raised.
No, Dawn, I don't. I just thank you. And the reason I'm asking this question has to do with the composition of the review committee for the selection of a coastal resiliency consultant, but that has to do with another issue. So thank you.
Okay, understood. Thank you. We'll move on to actual Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee, revised interim recommendation to accommodate National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, sea level rise scenario for certain town projects, continued from the 15th of July, 2020. We continued this just to work out some internal discussion. I know that Vince and Mary are both here, and they probably had some discussions with Chuck Larson. Does that, Vince, Mary, who should I go to? Mary?
Yes, so exactly. Chuck and Vince met after the last appearance at the select board meeting. They worked out some specific recommendations to modify our document. And then Chuck joined us at a meeting of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee last week. And we incorporated his recommendations into the revised document that you have before you. I will say thank you to Chuck and to Vince for working on that, because the document, we think, is more precise and more useful than it was before. So we are happy with the document that is being presented to you tonight.
Thank you very much. Vince, did you have anything to add?
Not really. If Mary covered it all, Chuck clarified some language, updated some language. He brought in very specific terms to tie down exactly what we were looking for, whereby certain words like scenario and projection, which I had taken as somewhat interchangeable, are now very much tied down to one exact meaning. And we also tied it to a very specific sea level as of the year 2000. So everything is now tied quite close to a very finite starting point. And again, just to echo Mary, thank you to Chuck for clarifying and bringing that certainty to us, and thank you to Mary and the committee for going through it in such detail last week and bringing it back to this select board. Thank you.
Board, any questions, comments? Could we go to a vote?
Avery is the DA laid off 90.
Melissa and Matt?
That's okay, Matt, you can go ahead.
I was going to make a motion, but I'll wait if you have a question.
I really don't. I just want to thank you all for taking that extra little bit of time and the extra effort you put into it. I read through it. I feel really confident that this has been thoroughly reviewed, and I'm happy to support it. So if Matt's making a motion, I'm happy to second it.
All right, so moved.
Okay, all those in favor by roll call. Matt Fay?
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella?
Aye.
Jason Bridges?
Aye.
Melissa Murphy?
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Thank you so much for taking the extra time.
Thank you very much for your vote.
Approved unanimously. Next, we move to the town manager's activity report.
Thank you. I won't go through every single item on here, just maybe some of the highlights. So there's a number of plans, reports, and studies underway. A number of them are listed on the item in your packet. Lots of COVID issues occurring. Your strategic plan update is currently scheduled to be discussed at a retreat in October. Coastal Resiliency Plan has been mentioned. We're working on kind of a, it's more administrative, but a capital project management plan with our new assistant finance director. That's going pretty well. Lots of meetings. Some of these happen weekly or bi-weekly or monthly or just on some other standing regular basis. We have a every other week beach meeting with regard to COVID issues, and it's town staff plus Conservation Commission, trustees of reservations, and land bank, and we all talk over the various issues. A lot of really good teamwork between all of those agencies. The 2021 annual town meeting and election planning is underway, and in the next couple of weeks, it's a bit late, but for obvious reasons, but I'm planning to bring to you a date for the 2021 annual town meeting, a recommended date, and I'm working on a timeline with some others, so that'll be coming as well. Just skipping over some of the stuff here because I'm not going to read every single thing, but we think we had a pretty successful annual Nantucket Community Association Forum this past Monday. It was different happening on Zoom rather than at the Athenaeum where we've had it for the last 12 years. And so this 13th year was, you know, the new normal for now. I've attended a couple of summer meetings, the Advisory Committee of Non-Voting Taxpayers, and the chair and I attended the Nantucket Civic League Annual President's Breakfast. The FinCom recently had a way of working meeting, and that was something developed by the FinCom chair that sort of more definitively lays out what the FinCom is working on and how they work on it. It was a really good session. So I'm looking forward to working with them on that. Lots of different projects going on. As you can see, many COVID-related issues. That is really still dominating our workload right now. Some other projects are underway as listed there. Still working on the old fire station reuse. I know that's taking a long time, and I know the trailer's hideous, but at least we are definitely moving forward on that. Things are happening. The senior center and the island home are projects that are back to having active discussion. Last October, the board took a vote about public beach access, and we have developed with the real estate specialist, myself and town council and some others, a report for the board about this. And we are in the process of scheduling an executive session, probably mid-September for that. We're trying to get back to plastics ban outreach and some paving projects. Oh, I guess I could have stricken off the special town meeting item there because we're not doing that anymore. We're working on our PFAS contract with the agency we've hired to do an island-wide risk assessment, and that is going to kick off very shortly. I did a little field visit last week for a solar array project at the Wannacomet Water Company property. This will be a project between Milestone Road and Old South Road, and a contract will be coming to the board sometime probably early September with a little presentation from the consultants on that. Some personnel issues that are listed there. We are actively working to hire seasonal public health, at least one seasonal public health inspector to help handle inspections on evenings and weekends and randomly maybe throughout the day. Collective bargaining is ongoing for all units. And as the board knows, we are working to fill the new equity officer position.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions, comments? Okay. Oh, Christy?
Are we still looking for COVID officers, or have they been filled?
Well, we probably could use more. We have 3 right now, and I don't think we'd say no to more, but I don't know that we're actively looking for them. They seem to be getting around pretty well, although one of them is leaving. A couple of them may be leaving pretty soon, probably before the end of August. So if you have any candidates, send them our way.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have under select board's reports and comments, we were going to start review discussion about our committee appointment process and how we might be able to better improve the process. Some thoughts were put together. Our current process was put together by Erica, and some thoughts based on some of the feedback we had heard throughout the process was put together. We also did receive some written comments from a couple of members of the public making some suggestions, and John Giorgio provided us some feedback on what Dennis has in their process. And this is just an opportunity for the board to discuss thoughts. We don't have to make any decisions tonight, and we can certainly take some comments from the public. But I'd turn to board members first for any comments. Jason?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is good that we're starting this now in August, and I want to reiterate what you just stated, that we don't have to make any decisions tonight. We can hear from the public, we can discuss amongst ourselves and discuss with the public, and try to get some feedback, and then we can sit on it and process it, and then bring it back. So I just want to make sure everybody who's watching or involved, we're not deciding on anything tonight. I know you just said that, but I wanted to reiterate it. And I wanted to thank Judith Wagner and Doug Rose and some others who put in their thoughts. I read over what they suggested and just wanted to thank them. And I also read what Dennis did. It's interesting that they make a motion, like I'll nominate Bob for this appointment and then somebody has to second it and it has to go through. Have we ever done that before, Libby? Have we ever done it that way? Did we used to?
Sure, we've gone back and forth, but yeah.
So go back and forth from ballot to not verbally nominating.
Yeah, most recently it's been done by paper ballot, but certainly that has not always been the case.
Okay.
Oh, Matt, go ahead.
Is the Dennis stuff in the packet or was that sent separately?
Maybe that never made it into the packet, but it was an email from John. Did it go to all the board members?
No, I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it yet. That's what I was going to say.
Circulate that because they talked about one of the things that struck me that they talked about was the idea of the of a talent bank where resumes are kind of kept. I mean, I'd love to see something like that maybe kept electronically so it would be easy to refer back to because I mean what we saw, like Brooke Moore took real initiative with the Council for Human Services and actually kind of went around and asked people like, hey, might you be interested in running for this? And to some extent, I think some more recruitment could be very valuable. And to also file good talent into a bank for when there aren't enough seats for well-qualified candidates. So, Matt,
I'm glad to hear it had that in there because that was I thought Judith Wagner did a very good job with her suggestions, and she did a lot of work. And I think, and I saw that talent bank in hers, and I thought, geez, how would you do that? So it's actually interesting to hear that they do it in Dennis. I think that's a good, it makes me feel better even about what she presented.
Those are the ways the population can send them.
Christy?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Matt was saying, that I think it's a great way to keep track of who might be interested. I think something simple, just as, signing up to get an email notification when something's open. And it'd be a great way to get the word out when there's committees, but also positions that you're elected when we do our town elections. It would just be a great way to have that way to communicate with the community.
Yeah, especially in a lot of, we have a midterm, a point where we just have the resignation. It would be really great to line out to people who have before. Jason?
Yep, sorry to the board that I received that and I should have asked to put that in the packet. That's on me. But pretty much, Dennis, they, what stood out to me that was a little different was how they verbally motioned to elect to appoint the candidates. The volunteer talent bank, and then they interview candidates appointments no less than 2 weeks in advance, and then they have strict deadlines, kind of all the things that we've been talking about. But when we bring this back, or we can send it around to the whole board and also put it in the packet next time we bring this up.
Melissa?
Thank you. And thank you, Jason. I like everything that I'm hearing. I also, in some of my conversations, as one of the founders of Women Engaged in Civic Action on Nantucket, we held some forums and to do what I called demystifying the both appointment process and the election process. And it would be great for more organizations like We Can and the Civic Association to help with what you were just talking about that Brooke did so well, which is even if it's not necessarily recruitment directly one-on-one, really helping to talk up why it's important to have that kind of civic engagement requirements to serve. Because I think not only do we need some clearer guidelines and perhaps better transparency in the appointment process, but I also think we need to really widen the pool of applicants so that they're more diverse representation of our community members. And that should be something that we're talking about while we're talking about this. And it's not necessarily for this board or the town to do alone. I think we need the partnership of groups like We Can, Nantucket Equity Advocates, and the Civic League to work with us to that end. So thank you.
Melissa, it might be, as we go down the road and we have the DEI director, and they can be able to come in and help on the diversity side of a talent bank. I think we could be a really good community initiative. Any other questions from the board? I was going to just make a couple comments on what Doug Rose put in there, and then I was going to go to the public. The board's okay with that. Dawn stepped away for a second. She asked me to take over just for a minute here. I liked what Mr. Rose had to say about clear, consistent deadlines. I think we're all in agreement that whether it's 4 weeks or 2 weeks or whatever it is, like that's going to be pretty clear. We're all going to go down that road. One thing is that he suggested that I agreed with, that I've gotten feedback from people who've been appointed on committees and commissions and councils and who are on it, and they mentioned to me that if they had to go up in public and come up and give their spiel, and then other people from the public could say why they don't think they should be on the board, or why they should, they would not run. And I think that would be a hurdle for a lot of people. So I think there's a way to do it and still be really transparent, and people can send it in email to the board, and that can be put in the packet. It can still be public. But I would caution us to maybe not go down that road, or at least have the discussion on that. I don't know if anybody else has gotten feedback on from other people who have been appointed that maybe would make them feel uncomfortable.
I certainly have had that feedback, Jason, not necessarily from people who have been appointed, but for people who have been interested in throwing their hat in the ring, so to speak. I think there's an artful way to have debate about qualifications and people's interests without necessarily having to talk about pros and cons of personalities. And so I look forward, I understand the intent behind that, but I do caution us to be careful that it doesn't become sort of a new barrier to participation.
Christy, and then Matt.
Thanks. I was just talking with a few people about barriers, and one of the things is coming to the select board meetings for that public comment. And I think one of the suggestions, I forget who proposed it, but allowing people to speak at either of the two meetings before we make the selections so that people have flexibility. But I also think being able to kind of advertise that people can submit comments to the board for people who are working at that time. I know we had everything by Zoom this year, and I was amazed by how many people called in from sitting in their car or, in their office. So people are trying to give back to the community, but don't always have that space to do it at, 5 or 6 p.m. on a Wednesday. So being flexible in that case, I think, is important.
Thank you, Christy. Matt?
Yeah, I was going to, same thing. Christy just said it. I think getting questions ahead of time, so was how I think Judith was suggesting it. I think that makes sense. I will say I'm not very good as a public speaker. I don't like speaking in public. I was not comfortable. I'm getting better at it, but I'm still nervous. I still flub along, and people who are thinking about it, over time, it gets easier. If you're shy and you're not good at that, eventually you get it. So I think, but I think we have to make it possible for them to get their foot in the door to do that.
Any other discussions? Oh, Melissa, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, Matt, you're absolutely right. And that's where I think groups like We Can and the Civic League and even some other community groups can get together I know Jason used to have a public speaking training group. I mean, all of those things are helping empower leadership qualities in community members for who are interested in it, but don't quite know what the next step to take is or have not had that experience. And I think if we've got a lot of great people in the community who, if we can pull them together, can help with that kind of engagement and quote unquote training side of things. And as long as our process is transparent and clear, I don't think we'll bump up against the same issues.
I also think that we can take advantage of, is any opportunities, any, silver lines we can find from COVID as people were paying more attention to these meetings, to state what's going on in Massachusetts, and they want to get involved more now. And they've been watching select board meetings or Board of Health or CONCOM, and And so let's take advantage of that, and whether it's a talent bank or whatever we can do, and make that a silver lining from 2020. Chrissy, you had your hand up?
Yes, I just got a couple more comments before we open it up to the public. As I was thinking through this process of, how do we have more participation from the community, and really thinking about kind of that marketing strategy of letting people know when things are open. So I think having a clear plan of how we do our annual appointments, but also when something comes up mid-year. I can speak as a new member this past December when we did a Concom appointment. I didn't realize that we weren't going to hear from the people who had put their name in. I thought we were just going to vote that night, and so we had delayed it a week so we could hear from them. But as a new person, I was like, oh, that's the process, and I got a little confused. So I think something where we can have the same process whether it's a mid-year or an annual thing. But thinking about marketing, I think we put it in the INM, but if there's other things we could do, like putting it on the radio, if we want to work on ways to reach the working class and get more of our community involved, I think we have to have multiple spaces to let people know. And I think that talent bank could also be a great way to reach people by email.
Erica?
I just wanted to note that amazingly this year we filled the most amount of seats during our regular committee appointment process. There were very few seats left vacant. So I think more and more people are stepping forward, which I think is a great thing. And Judith Wagner's had her hand raised for some time.
Is the board okay going to the public? Are we good? Okay. Sorry, Judith, thank you for waiting patiently. Go ahead.
Thank you for this discussion. And can you hear me okay? I guess you can hear me, or you tell me you can't. Yes, okay. Thank you. Thank you too for the clarification about your process going forward. I had been tracking this, as you could tell, and I think having more than just a few minutes before the board meeting for people to look at proposals and background will be helpful. So it's good to know you've got several possible meetings going forward. I just wanted to offer highlights of some of what I wrote. I think it's important to have some guiding principles about what really you're looking for in terms of expectations of appointees. I think there's been some of that in the handbook for committees before, and I should stress that I'm speaking as a private citizen, not as a member of the planning board here, but I think if there could be a resolution, I looked at a lot of different jurisdictions, and many of them have a formal resolution from their governing board as a way to encapsulate key policy dimensions with the handbook as a kind of background piece for those who are serving. But I would urge you to think about setting out what guiding principles there are, because that in turn can help you as you make ultimate appointments and as people submit their applications. It's interesting that you referenced Dennis, because the talent bank concept that I ran into that was very fully developed was from Chatham, Mass. So it's not only Dennis. And when I wrote it up, I tried to be clear that a couple of reasons why you might do this. I think people don't necessarily know based on the time of year when they should be applying. So there's a benefit to have them be able to express interest at any time, and then to get a notice when it's closer to the point of actual appointment consideration, to go back and update or to review what opportunities are available to them too. I think that also is beneficial for the reasons many of you said about just raising civic engagement. People who would like to be aware of the chance to volunteer may not know the differences among all these different committees and may not know when they're meeting. So if they have an easier entree that's available year-round for them to find out more about that, then it's more likely that they may put their hand up even tentatively and be able to follow and have that interest mature. I noticed too, or thought about the fact that there are times when there may not be any candidates at all that come forward, and I think Erica just noted that has happened occasionally in the past. So I think at some point it's important to be clear that you don't just keep going back indefinitely. There's been times just looking at some of the town boards and commissions where there may be massive vacancies and no real involvement. So among the things I suggested was to have the town government committee periodically review whether all the committees we currently have are really functional, or some of them might properly be consolidated or even abolished. I think, as you all have said, it's important to have clear timing and require timely and complete submission, or people shouldn't be eligible. And I also tried to suggest an enhanced application form, in part because I know people aren't comfortable always speaking out loud, but if there's more chance to kind of detail some of what might be relevant to you and what they may have to offer on the application form, that would make it easier for everybody concerned. I also suggested for the hearing process that it not be a free-for-all, but that if you have a structured set of qualifications and principles, you could invite citizens, give them notice to submit comments to you in advance, and then you be the ones asking the questions at the hearing, rather than having people on the fly trying to do that in a way that would be a deterrent to someone seeking application. Then back to the town government committee, it seemed to me I spent a fair amount of time looking at different jurisdictions and how they proceeded with their appointments. You've talked about, it came up with the last round with the Concom appointments. There may be some boards that you would need to specify clearly that some proportion of seats be flagged for those with particular background or interest. That's currently the case for some boards, I think, like HDC or ZBA or whatever, but it may be worth asking the town government committee to look more systematically at that. I also thought that, again, referring to what I saw in doing research here, some places limit explicitly the role of town employees and how their roles may interact with their involvement on town boards. I know we have the conflict of interest provisions that should address that, but I think when people are seeking appointments, they may not already have gone through training or reviewed the conflict of interest provisions, so it may be worth spelling out some of those considerations. It's also in the interest of trying a more inclusive participation by the public. I think that there are a handful of folks that are on many different boards at the same time. Some of those are cross appointments. For example, NPEDC has members that are defined as planning board members, and those that are appointed by you folks as select board, as well as Concom and the Housing Authority and some others. But it might be worth thinking about how many boards somebody should really be participating in if they're not that kind of coordination role, but they're outright appointments. Same thing with term limits, that term limits have pluses and minuses. You can limit expertise when you don't want to do it if you apply them too woodenly. On the other hand, you can end up with boards that are just so really lacking in changeover that you don't have fresh ideas, or you may have kind of a shared perspective that doesn't allow other insights to come into play. So I hope as you think about this overall picture, you'll spend the time that is warranted here, and that you'd consider not only the range of things that you might do in a statement or a resolution that you issue, but also consider having some of these other topics be sent over to the town government committee for their review, since some of them may require bylaw changes. Thank you for the chance to comment.
Thank you for the input. It's all very valuable discussion. Sorry, I had to step away for a moment. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak on this evening? Any other board comments? Melissa?
Thank you, Dawn. I think Judith makes a really good point, and I hadn't really thought about how to engage the town government study committee. But I do think if we are going to ask them to take a look at any of this, I also want to make sure that they're looking at it through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and with the mission of not just the appointment process, but some comments that I've heard from folks are time of day of some of the meetings, if they're happening during business hours, is that automatically excluding a segment of population who is required to work between 8 and 5 p.m. Questions like that, I think there's some good polling we can do in the community to gauge if those changes need to be made. And it seems that Judith's suggestion is spot on, that kind of research could go to the town government study committee on our behalf.
On that point, to some extent, I think that these small committees can choose their own meeting times as well once if their membership is reconstituted and people have conflicts, those meeting times can be changed. Even the CPC that has historically met at 3:15 on a Tuesday, since COVID happened, we now meet at 10 o'clock in the morning. So just, I mean, people can alter, but so there can be some fluidity of how they're structured based on membership, but I wouldn't want it to be a deterrent for anybody if they normally meet at 10 a.m. or 3 in the afternoon, that people would think that they're excluded from doing it. I mean, go ahead, Christy.
I was just going to ask kind of what the next steps would be and how we're going to formalize this process.
That's kind of up to the board. I mean, we don't have annual appointments for quite a long time, but we do have currently an opening on HTC, which we may or may not get applications for. I mean, one of the things that I felt was really important based on all of the feedback that I'd like to see instituted right away is if we have applications, I would like to see those names announced for people at least 2 meetings so that the public is very well aware of who might be running. I also thought it worked very well to receive written comments from the public. I'm fearful of the idea of taking public comment on applicants in a public forum. I like the written input better, written questions to the board, and the board having the ability to have a discussion with the applicants that is a public meeting, but not necessarily a public hearing, more of a like meet the candidates kind of forum type of situation. So I'm not sure if I'm being repetitive because I had to walk out of the room for a couple of minutes on anything that anybody else said. Melissa?
I don't think you're being repetitive at all. And I don't know, Dawn, if it would be helpful to have a volunteer from our board to perhaps work with Erica and Libby to come up with, some of this feedback and come up with some recommendations to bring forward maybe in a month or so, could even be in October, for the board to consider and take this feedback and this direction from this conversation and start to put some meat on the bone, if you will, to the next step and direction.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to volunteer to work with in a small group capacity to do that.
Rick Atherton has his hand raised.
Unmute, Rick.
Dawn, can you hear me?
Yes, Rick, go ahead.
Just, an observation from a number of years of experience of appointments. And when I first joined the board, a prior participant on the board suggested to me that committee appointments were often the most difficult and personal choices board members have to make. And I appreciate some structure to the process, but I think the board ought to be cautious about over structuring the process There will always be situations where that's not called for. So that's just some general advice. And as I say, some of the ideas you've heard are good, but I think you need to exercise some thoughtful consideration of what really is involved here. Thank you very much.
Rick, thank you so much for saying that. That's really helpful input. And definitely one of the things that I've been thinking about as well is that we don't want to make it so stringent that it sort of takes away the board's ability to, or the individual board member's ability to think through how they want to make the appointments. Matt, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just quick. I think that we've got a blueprint. I think that what Judith gave us we could work from that very easily and refine that. I don't think we have to remake the wheel. But
Jason?
Multi-prong initiative. One is just structuring deadlines and process and keeping the transparency very tight, and so everybody knows what's happening. And then there's like the recruitment, the talent bank, and that side of things. And it's all kind of in the same bucket, but this seems a little different. But one question is, as I was listening to everybody on how we're going to try to recruit differently, marketing was brought up. Christy and Melissa were hitting that. Back to the silver lining from 2020, is there a way in the next year, it could be 18 months, is to allow remote participation for people. So there is a 10 a.m. meeting, and people can go to the water company and meet with Capcom, but we can also have one person remotely in there as well. So they can still listen, maybe better than just, a phone, somebody calling in, but pretty much having somebody come in and Zoom, and every meeting can have people come in. I think that would help with participation. I don't know exactly how it could be worked out with IT, but is that a way that, a parent can jump in at a 6 o'clock meeting from 6 to 6:45, and they don't have to leave and come back, and maybe that could open up, that talent bank we're talking about.
Mary Longacre?
Thank you. Yes, I had a comment just as a citizen, not representing the Coastal Advisory Committee at all. One of the elements that this process, I think, needs some improvement on is when the public makes a comment, particularly a written comment in an email, I think it's important that they know where that comment is going, and that all comments that are received are treated the same way. So some comments received in time to make it into the packet were published in the packet. Other comments were not received in time, so they were not published. Some comments might have been sent to an individual and then sent on to a group and then sent on to somebody who might want to know. And the person who sent the email, while they would be aware that it's public record, would not know that those comments were being forwarded around and shared. So I think that part of this process would be a clear statement of, if you make a comment, this is what will happen to it, and this is where it will be published, and this is who it will be shared with, so that people are simply aware of that. And again, I'm not representing the committee or making any complaint, just trying to offer feedback into a part of the process that I haven't heard addressed. If I may, to Jason's point, especially with COVID, there will be people, even when an all clear is declared, that will feel more comfortable participating remotely than participating in person. And so it's my personal hope that remote participation will be something that is more flexible in the future. Thank you.
Mary, that's exactly what I was alluding to, is once we do get to all go back in the same room, what have we learned here, technology-wise, and more comfortable with, figuring out the technology and allowing just what you said. So I hope we can definitely put that on our, planning IT list.
If I may, one other point is that I know our committee has a representative from the Advisory Committee of Non-Voting Taxpayers, and that person is not a year-round resident, and they participate by phone, which is, is acceptable, but their participation would be enriched if they were able to participate, with video and audio. And so that's another benefit. Also, anybody who's traveling who was normally on a committee can take advantage of that. So again, I hope that is something that we can incorporate. Thank you.
Thank you. What's everyone's thought on a little subcommittee to come back with some decision points based on what we've heard so far? And Jason?
Yeah, I think it makes sense with, what Judith sent in, what, the modifications that, we put together, possible modifications. I think we can come up with something. And Melissa said, she's going to rock it. So I think it's a great idea.
Matt?
Should we put Judith on the committee with Melissa and staff? I'll make that as a motion.
John Giorgio? John, you're muted.
I know. Now I'm not. Thank you. I just would be a little bit careful about, it's fine to create a committee, but depending upon the makeup of the committee, it would be subject to the open meeting law, and you may very want to have these discussions in an open session, but it just does create the issue of taking minutes and posting and that kind of thing. So I'm not sure where the board's going on this, but
I was much more comfortable with the idea of a staff of one board member and you, John, to be the counsel on this. I don't know that it's really appropriate for it to be the chairman of the planning board. I'm sorry. I know that Judith has some very valuable input and experience, but I think that this should be more of a very much select board initiative. Melissa?
I agree, Don. And I think that Judith has given us such a fabulous roadmap of her input that certainly, if I'm the select board member working with staff on this, if there are questions or other advice we feel like we need, I know how to reach Judith. But I don't make that suggestion to make the process more complex, but really to work with staff to represent our conversation and the constituents' concerns to create a more transparent process, and that maybe we can bring back something that maybe can't even necessarily be voted on right away, but is a bit more substantive for discussion and action in the next couple of months. That was the intent behind my suggestion.
Matt, are you comfortable with something like that, or did you want to?
Well, I'll retract. I'm not going to second, so I'll retract my motion. But I just, and I'm fine. I'm comfortable with it, but I want to make sure that, we, that we put meat on the bones, that we do the, anyway. And I think we will.
Do you want to make a new motion? No? Does somebody else want to?
I'll make a motion to have Melissa work with staff to come up with a draft of how we're going to move forward and to bring it back to the select board in the next. We need a time frame, 4 to 8 weeks. No, okay.
I mean, I guess as soon as it's ready, and in the meeting, and we'll keep it, a fully public process with input from anyone who wishes to be a part of. But we'll just keep it simple with it being one board member, town administration, and town council. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's my motion. No time frame.
Okay. Second. All those in favor by roll call. Matt Fink.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
Ethan Bridges.
Aye.
Melissa Murphy.
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. Judith Wegner, you have your hand raised. Did you want to make a follow-up comment?
I hope you can hear me now. I just wanted to ask that there be sufficient public notice of your deliberations on this so that members of the public, since this is really stemming from concerns about transparency and openness that members of the public not be presented just with a fait accompli without a chance to know kind of what the direction is you're taking and all. So I would just simply ask that if you don't mind.
Jason?
I think my motion was to come up with a draft and to bring it back to the select board for public comment in open session.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was also what I said, that everything will be fully discussed and vetted and looking for all of the public input.
Thank you.
No, I appreciate your comments. Thank you. Oh, Judith, did we lose you? She's got her hand up again, Erica.
All I would say is the materials for today's meeting were posted 20 minutes before the meeting. So if you really do want public comment, it'd be good to be sure they get out sooner. Thank you.
Dawn, can I say that the meeting agenda packet was posted last Friday and the amendment was posted today? That was Roberto's packet that came in late.
That's the only thing that was new, Judith. All of this, everything about this was in the packet on Friday.
I'll go back and look at the earlier version that I pulled. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. Thanks. Okay, well, to be continued. Thanks, everyone. Continued discussion update on racial equity, race relations task force community forum. I know that Rachel could not be here tonight.
Madam Chair, the Council on Human Services looked at the RFP, which is the RFP for the strategic plan for the town for racial equity. And they looked at it this week, I believe on Monday, and I think in the next couple of days or next week, they're going to have their comments and their feedback on that. So it's great that they were able to put some time into look into that RFP process and the RFP itself. I think that's all I have. Anything that's new? I believe we have a lot of applicants for the DEI position. I heard over 40. I think we heard that in a recent meeting.
Yes.
So that's great. That's all I had.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I mean, we are just continuing to keep this on our agenda for updates. There won't be tons of updates every week, but things are progressing very, very well. Committee reports. Christy.
Thank you. So the NPDC met last week and we just did our annual appointments and appointments to subcommittees. I also just wanted to recognize Andrew for all the work he's doing with not having a transportation coordinator right now and working really closely with Rob. It was really great to recognize that. And we also talked a lot about kind of economic development in terms of kind of how do we diversify our economy. And so one of the topics for our next meeting will be talking about municipal broadband or expanding internet. So we'll be meeting in August and that will be the discussion. So I'll report back when that happens. The scholarship committee also meets yearly and we just did our yearly awards. So we gave out $45,000 to Nantucket High School students or residents. We had a ton of applicants this year, just about 60 applicants, and we always try to award as many as possible. And so we give out smaller funds to freshmen or post-grad and larger funds to sophomores, seniors, and juniors. And it's really great to see the people who have applied all years in a row and finishing off their college experience, even if it might be remote. But that's always fun to do those applications. And then just one other note with today's meeting, I know that we had a contract for Tyler Technologies with Energov, and maybe at some point in the upcoming weeks, we could get an update from IT on how the e-permitting is going. I know it was moving along fast and I'm sure COVID got in the way, but I was interested in hearing how that's been moving along. Thank you.
Anybody else tonight? Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Matt Fee,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Todd Holgate, aye. See you all tomorrow morning.
Previous phases, or 8 people per 1,000 square feet. So that's a really important number